Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Nichols of Soulful Integration. And today I have with me Gabi Garland, and we are going to be talking about trauma and spirituality. So for those of you that haven't worked with me, I do about one of these presentations about once a month. And it's topics around spirituality, personal growth, well-being, health, anything that kind of fits under that general umbrella. And then I'm a Reiki master, and I have been really delving into theta healing. So that's kind of how I'm looking into things from the perspective of this conversation. Now, Gabi is also certified in Reiki, NLP, and trauma hypnosis, which is why I asked her here today. And she also hosts the Resilient Heart podcast, and she's an authenticity coach. So welcome, Gabi. Can you tell us just a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
First of all, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I think, and I say it, I will say it every time I ever have an interview anywhere ever, making connections with women like you is why I love social media, getting to have really meaningful conversations and build friendships. Like, I just love that part of what social media can be and what people need to make it about.
Absolutely.
So my background is I have a sales and marketing management background. So I've got like 25 years experience, like business development, management, relationship building within Fortune 500 companies. And I went into the network marketing world back in 2013, did very well, got absolutely burned out, hated every second, and left. Yeah. And then just kind of went on my healing. I moved from my hometown to the East Coast when I met my husband. And so I've been here about 6 years now. So I'm married, my daughter's 22 and she's a police officer. And then I have my son with my husband, and he's 3 years old and wild as hell, like straight up wild. So
that's super fun. In ages. So that's an exciting time in your life, I'm sure.
It is. It's much more exhausting at 40 than it was at 21. I'll tell you that.
Right. I have a 21-year-old myself, and that was enough love for me for kids, for sure.
I'm like, what was this? So I'm happy. He's amazing, but yeah, it's a lot.
For sure. Awesome. Well, do you want to just dive right into it?
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things right off the bat, and feel free to stop me if there is something that you specifically want to ask or want to talk about. Right. But I think we hear the word trauma a lot. You hear this is traumatic, events that happen in the world. And a lot of people don't know what the true definition of trauma is. I'm just going to read you the best definition that I've found for it. So it's an emotional response to a terrible event or experience. And there are macro traumas and micro traumas. So macro obviously is just a bigger, more like, unfortunately, when you look at like something like the shooting in Uvalde, that's going to be a macro trauma. That is a huge life-changing traumatic event. Micro traumas would be something like somebody saying something mean to you, but it was like a one-time, one comment incident.
Or my mom left me at the store when I was 5 or something.
Yeah, something small. It's not like, and a lot of times those micro traumas are things that change the way that we think in our brain about different things, but they're really small stuff that people don't really think about until you really do some work kind of releasing those thought processes and like where those belief systems come from. So there's acute, chronic, and complex. So acute is one single incident, very traumatic, like a shooting, like being raped, assaulted, that kind of thing. Chronic is repeated or prolonged. So for me, when I think about my own trauma, mine was repeated or prolonged, and that was within a domestic violence relationship that lasted for almost 9 years. So that was, some of it was physical violence, some of it was emotional, it was all of the things. Complex could be multiple events that are kind of tied to each other. So it could be something where it could be tied to being at the church and you had some incidents that happened at the church or within some sort of leadership type position, but a couple different things are kind of tied together as an event that make that trauma. For me, when I think about trauma in itself, it is what changes who we are and what we believe about ourselves. So a lot of times I'll work with people and they're like, okay, you give them a whole list of stuff they want to do. And this is something recent even within a client. Give a client a list of, okay, when you're looking at growing your business, here's a list of the things that you need to do. And you may know these are the things I need to do. You may know those things are going to help me do what I need to do. But there is something about doing it that is difficult for you. And a lot of times people think, oh, it's because you're lazy, or oh, you just don't want to be successful. But there is something about the way that you have to show up in the world, the way you feel about yourself, something that you've taken with you. And one of the things that I learned for myself, and I'll just touch on a little bit more of my backstory. So I am like the poster child for like failure, basically. I mean, let's just be, I got held back in fifth grade. So from a very young age, I had this belief system that I was not intelligent. And then I dropped out of high school, dropped out of college twice, kind of three times. And it never really occurred to me until I started doing my healing that moment when I was in the fifth grade, when the conversation was that we're going to go to fifth grade again. I took that with me throughout my life. And that was my belief system, that I was not intelligent and that school was hard for me. So when I would go into school, I would automatically sabotage. I would automatically make things more difficult. I wouldn't do my homework because then I would have a reason to say that's why I'm not successful. But when it was around the belief system that I was not smart enough to do it anyway.
Can we touch on something real quick, Gabby?
Absolutely.
So when you were experiencing all these things, what did it feel like
In my
emotionally?
body. The things that I went through, like as far as traumatic,
Right.
I remember in the elementary school situation it's kind of funny. It came up in a session that I did for myself just a couple of months ago about worthiness. It was just like, what am I worthy of? And being talkative, which is interesting that it came up. And it was a teacher that was saying like, oh my God, all she does is talk all the time. Like she doesn't want to focus. And I had ADD. And so they just kind of like wrote me off. And it really just felt like unlovable, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was very much like I was getting to hear all of the things about me that were wrong. And I wasn't hearing a whole lot about me that was great. There was not a whole lot of conversation like, she's so kind, or she's so funny, or she's so talented at ballet. Like all of the things that I felt like I was probably pretty good at. There wasn't the counteracting of the things that were wrong with me with things that were positive. And so my ingrained belief system was that I wasn't worthy and I wasn't lovable, and everything in my life played to that narrative for countless years as a result.
Yeah. Until you started your healing, I would bet.
Oh yeah. And I mean, the thing that I think people have to understand when you think about trauma is it manifests in so many different ways in our lives. Like you look at, for me, my trauma was obviously a worthiness piece, but it was also taking the domestic violence relationship for me. I became to think that like, that's how relationships were supposed to be. Like, and that sounds stupid now that I say it, like people are not supposed to fight like dudes within the context of a relationship. That's not normal. Like, I know that now. But being in that relationship from a really young age until 25 when he passed away, I got into a relationship shortly after. And I remember like anytime he would say anything to me, I would like just backhand him. I'm like, oh, just shut up. And he was like, he grabbed my hands one time in the kitchen and he was like, normal people do not hit each other when they don't like something that's being said. And I was like, like it was that kind of like,
Well, and a
oh,
lot of
that's
this is on the subconscious level, right, Gabby? I mean, it's not like we think, gee, it's right to hit people in a loving relationship. It's absolutely not in our conscious mind, correct?
no. And I think that's so, people, we think, we do so many things naturally in the way that we move in the world, and we have no idea why. And
Right.
it's all subconscious level of the things that we've experienced, the traumas that we've experienced, and the way that our body stores it in our bodies and in our minds. And then our lives play out, our behaviors play out in a way that's based upon those belief systems that are kind of just deeply rooted in. I always think it's like, it's deeply rooted in your DNA until you get rid of it. Like, that's kind of how I feel about the way that it felt for me.
I totally agree with you. And the thing is this can show up in our parenting styles. It can show up in our relationships with our parents. It shows up everywhere.
Yeah, it does. And um, it's such a sad thing, because I think about just within myself and within just clients too, when you have been through some really tough stuff in your life, some people never make it out of it, and they stay that person forever, and they go to jail, and they never, there's the jails are filled with people that have been through trauma in their life and were discarded. They were never helped. And then they played to the behaviors that got them attention. And sometimes attention, whether it's good or bad, is still attention. And so that's what they sought. And, you know, people don't inherently want to do horrible things to other people, but trauma allows for that. And there's mental illness and all kinds of other things that go into play. But we're not meant to be that way.
No,
We're just not. And I think about all the years that I used to fight with women in bars and start fights and say hateful things to people. Like, that was just my own way of expressing to the world the hurt that I had inside of myself that I didn't understand. And I didn't know that, like, the reason I'm hateful is because I've been through some things. I was just like, it's just the way that I am.
or possibly that's just the way that the world is. It becomes your paradigm. You're coloring everything with it.
Yeah. Or the other thing that a lot of people will do is when they have that belief system, when they think that about themselves or the world, they play the victim to those things. So like, you automatically like, oh, this is the way the world is. And then someone tells you, oh, the world isn't this way. And then you play the victim versus being accountable for it, because you're not seeing it the way they're seeing it. And you haven't done enough healing or enough looking within to look at what it is, to understand that that's the root of it.
And I feel like we're pretty heavy right now. So let's give them all a spoiler. We've been kind of alluding to it, but it absolutely can change. There are absolutely ways to help it change and to change this whole thing into something better. There are different ways.
Absolutely. I'm curious. So when you talk, because we talked about this right before everybody hopped on, and I'm curious for you, just because I want you to answer this one for me, my own. So when you think about theta healing, when people ask, like, what does theta do? Because I have to answer hypnosis questions all the time, because people think it's like you get a little clock like in the cartoon and they're like, you're very sleepy. And I'm like, no, that is not what it is. So when someone asks you what theta healing is, what is the best way to explain it, or for people to understand what it is?
So the best way for me to explain it is there's a couple of different things it does. It works a lot around forgiveness, especially of yourself. And for me, that has been the most key point. But it also uses clearing statements to help release some of these traumas and these limiting beliefs, okay, so basically, normally we're going around and we have all these habits. And it's like there's this big, well-ingrained highway. It's like a brand new road. You're driving on it. It's very easy. And that's the easiest way to get there. So what theta healing does is it creates a new path. And this new path isn't as easy as the other path, but it automatically heals you. So you have the choice of taking the new path, which you can then build up. So basically, you're in a theta healing session, you get all these different belief works done, you work through some traumas, you work through forgiveness, and then it's kind of fun, playful work. You get to start noticing things, and you get to start seeing how you behave. You pay attention, and then you get to make different choices. And that's where the magic is. Getting to make those different choices is absolutely amazing.
I love that. That's so cool. I'm such a, like, when I started my own healing stuff, which I always tell people, like, I was in therapy for years. I went to anger management. They passed me out of anger management, had zero business being passed out of anger management. I was still very angry. But I went looking, and it's kind of funny because it was literally almost 3 years ago when I went to a Reiki healer. Was the first time that I'd ever gone. And it was right after I lost, it was right after I had baby Lenny. So he was only like 3 months old, and he'd already had one heart surgery, but right before we got pregnant with him, I had lost, we call that baby Rainbow. I had lost Rainbow. And I had gone to lunch with a girlfriend, and we ended up going to like a Reiki healer session. And the first thing he said to me, he was like, he's like, there is a soul that you held, is what he said. And that there's a grief there for you that you have carried with you for a little over a year. And I was like, sitting there doing the math after he finished. And it was the grief from that pregnancy loss. And I remember like not really understanding that session very much because it was just so new for me. But I remember walking out and feeling lighter, and that was the only way that I could explain it. And then it was like, okay, well, what can I do? And then they gave me like, there's these different things that you can buy and all these, and that was really 3 years ago was when I really started to like get serious about helping myself get better outside of traditional therapy, because I'm always going to be a therapy fan. I think it's so important. It's covered by insurance, which is, it's always helpful. But going on a journey that looked a little bit different than what I had done before, because that had clearly not worked for me, has been life-changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done a little bit of therapy myself, but overall, I like the alternative path of being able to work with a coach. It gives you a little bit of a different perspective, and the relationship is a little bit different.
Yeah, no, it's same. And it was such a, my first spiritual coach, and I'm still really good friends with her now. I found her oddly enough on Instagram, and it was this one, I love when I always think of it like spirit just kind of drops somebody in when something's going on with you. And I had a mediumship visit, and I was like really kind of shook by it. And I'd had a couple fairly recently as well. But I didn't really understand it because growing up, and this kind of ties to the spirituality piece, we weren't taught, like I grew up a very Catholic. My mother was Methodist, my father was Catholic, and there wasn't really conversations around spirits and all of those types of things. And so I remember, I think I did say something to them about me seeing my grandfather at the bottom of the stairs not long after he passed away. And I remember the look on whoever's face, and I don't remember who it was, which is probably better because I would probably be salty. But I remember that look, and in that look, I was like, oh, this isn't something that is good. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
shouldn't
not
say this.
okay.
Yeah, it's not okay. And so I would talk to him all the time. But I didn't know that was being a medium. I didn't know if it was prayer. I didn't really understand it. And so I kind of would go to church, and then I wouldn't go to church. And kind of the fault line for me with church happened shortly after I had my daughter, and her father passed away. And her father was the domestic violence relationship in my life. And I went to the church because I was like, I grew up in church. I'm lost right now. I don't know what to do. We weren't together when he passed away. But I wanted to know, like, where do I go from here? How do I get better? What do I do with my baby? And so I sat down with the priest, and he was like, well, how long ago did your husband pass away? And I was like, well, he wasn't my husband. And that's when he proceeded to tell me that my baby was an abomination, and that he had nothing to say to me. And I was like, and now we're done with religion. And
oh man, and it doesn't have to be that way, but it's heart-wrenching, and you're not the only one that I've heard a similar story from.
And there's such a, like, so much of what I've learned over the years, and I've had people tell me I'm a witch because I do, because I'm a medium, I've had all kinds of crazy stuff said to me. But the interesting thing to me that has always come, and why I kind of like, there's spirituality and then there's religion. For me, spirituality is the way that I move in the world and the belief system that I carry with me. That's just kind of the way that I explain spirituality. And religion for me is rules. And if for me, I always think, like, as long as I'm kind to people, as long as I do my best, as long as I live in integrity, as long as I try to help and never harm, like, I'm okay. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. At least that's the way that I think about it at this point in my life.
And that's so interesting, because as you were saying that and talking about spirituality, I realized that my definition of spirituality has shifted like crazy amounts since I started my theta healing.
Wow.
I didn't really grow up much with a lot of church. I did like some CCD, some Catholic things. I go to like some lock-ins and do all the fun little kid stuff that you get to do at church, right? But my mom was more spiritual, and we got to go to like some new age fairs and stuff. But I realized that currently my definition of spirituality is just, cancel the word just, because this is actually pretty amazing, but it's really how I relate to God. Mm-hmm. And how I relate to God these days is I talk to God every day. And this guides my actions and how I feel as a person and a whole bunch of other different stuff, obviously. But so thank you for the aha and how the definitions changed.
It does. And I think the more that you heal and the more that you grow, it takes on different meanings, even if the core belief or the core pieces don't necessarily change. And I think for me, when I look at the way that I am now, when I think about religion, or when I think about what I thought God was before, and I had like a kind of a pretty pissed off, I wouldn't even say pretty, I was furious with God around. So there's two events that kind of changed the the religion or the belief system that I kind of had at that point. So within the domestic violence relationship, after, of course that was traumatic when the priest was like, yeah, I can't help you. But prior to that was this belief that like there was always so much happening with him. He was always doing something. He was always starting drama. Like one time he literally kidnapped our kid and wouldn't tell me where she was. And then I had to call the cops, and then they had to pull up and surround his vehicle and get my baby girl back. And I remembered praying every night, please just make it stop. Like, please, I just want to go to bed and not be scared. I want to go to bed and not worry that someone's going to steal my baby. And I just like, it's such a sad prayer.
Yeah.
But I just wanted peace. Like, that's all I wanted. And then when he was killed, I was like, who the hell prays for someone to die? Like, I literally internalized, like, I'm the reason that he's dead because I asked for this. And obviously I didn't, but when you pray for peace and then you get the answer to your prayer in a way that doesn't really make sense to you, that's pretty traumatic. You're like, well, what the hell did I just do? And so that was like a pinnacle changing moment for me. One, about the power of the things that I say in my life, and the belief systems that I carry, that just kind of shook everything for me.
Well, and bringing the subconscious back in a little bit, it doesn't have the opportunity to regulate. Our conscious mind, we can make decisions, but our subconscious mind, you got to watch it.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And then the second one was when I had my son. Of course, I was really angry when I lost the baby because it was like, I did everything right. I had been so shamed for being a single mother and being in a domestic violence relationship and struggling as hard as I did. And people had so many shitty things to say about all of the mistakes that I made. And I was just really trying to navigate the trauma that I had experienced that nobody was trying to help me with. Everyone was just like, she's drinking all the time. She's fighting in bars. Like, anybody stop to think why that might be? Like,
right?
You know what I mean? Normal people don't do that. And so you sit there and nobody was really trying to help me then. And so I was a mess. I was an absolute shit show. And it was sad now that I look back on it. And then when I got married, my husband, he's incredible, wonderful human being. We got pregnant right after we got married. And I was like, I've escaped. And I kind of felt like I escaped the curse of my life. And then we had the pregnancy loss. And I was like, so does God just hate me? Like, I finally do all the things that are on the checklist of what they say at church. Wait till you get married and have a baby and a home and a secure environment. And then all of a sudden you're going to take my kid. And then then baby Lenny had all these heart defects and he was going to have surgeries very shortly after his birth. And it was going to be all this complicated stuff. And I was like, what the hell, man? Because you think you grow up believing that like, these are the matrix that you're supposed to meet up, and then you do it and then it doesn't look like that. And it rocks you.
And one of the things I'm finding interesting about all this is, as a theta healer, when I'm talking to people, I will specifically ask them to write out a forgiveness list to just clear all that energy. And God is on there. And that is one of the things that trip people up the most, because people, they're either, it's fine, I don't blame God, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, or they are very, very angry, very angry.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to be angry. I do. Like, anytime really horrible, horrific events happen in the world, people are always angry at God. Like, how can you let this happen? And, you look at, school shootings, like, God would never want babies to just get mowed down in their classroom. Like, that's not who loves us. That's not what that is. And I think when traumatic things happen in the world, the first thing to do is people look for someone to blame. And it's usually something outside of the person that is supposed to be to blame.
Yeah, absolutely. And bottom line is, God can take it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He got cussed out by me for a hot minute. He's all right. He knows his girl. Man. So another thing I want to talk on just really quickly is when people think about spirituality and they think about the things that they've been through. And I think there's such a need to understand how much healing we have within ourselves, because so often, obviously hypnosis is a tool, theta healing is a tool, Reiki is a tool. so much of that is just for you to silence everything outside and just figure it out. Like there's such a,
Yeah.
our minds and our bodies will show us exactly what you need as long as you're silenced enough and you're working with a practitioner that has something like this to be able to kind of walk you through it. And it's such a, I remember the first time that I did a hypnosis session and I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, I don't even know what this is for. I don't know. Like I didn't really know, but I trusted her. And that's probably the most important part of doing this, any type of this healing work with anybody, is like, do I implicitly trust this person to like have my best interest? Do I feel like I can let my armor down? Can I have a very candid, honest conversation with you and know that that's safe? And being able to be that safe space for people is such a blessing and it's such an honor. And
1000% yes.
it's, yeah. And it's, you know, and I know there's lots of people in the world that do what we do that don't have the same heart that we have. And that's always hard because, you know, I've had people come to me to do this work and they're like, you know, I spent blah, blah, blah with so-and-so and I didn't get anything. And then my business was out on the world. And I'm like, it's so sad because that's just not, you know, we didn't take an oath from a medical perspective, but like there's an oath, you know?
Yeah. I kind of like the harm none thing. I mean, that really is my oath. I do the best I can for every single one of my clients. I try and hold that safe, cancel the word try. I hold that safe space in just this loving way. In fact, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day and she was coming on to help me, but she was feeling she had a situation where she was just feeling so sad. And I'm like, well, do you want to talk about it a little bit? And she said, well, not really. And then before long, she's talking to me because I sense you're the kind of the same person. People will tell you things and they're like, why am I telling you this?
Happens at the grocery store, happens at the mall, happens at the gym. They're like, I have no idea why I'm like burdening my whole soul to you. And this has happened my whole life. And I think I didn't understand it back then, why that would be a thing. And it's so cool to have known that this is something that I've had my whole life from being a medium and getting to have those conversations. And I've never like done like a medium reading for somebody, you know, like people see it on TV where like I'm getting a grandmother, blah, blah, blah. Like I haven't honed it that specifically. It's more something that just happens for me. And I can always tell when it's gonna happen because it's very much like I feel heavy. Like I'm not sleeping very well, my joints kind of hurt, which sounds weird, but I know when it's coming because my dreams kind of change a little bit. And then I get, you know, within a couple of days, you know, whoever it is will drop in.
Well, and as a practitioner, just speaking for the practitioners out there, that is so important to realize. Just we all have these little cues and it's like we need to learn a new language. It's like, okay, if this happens, this is what it means. So we're creating this language so we know what's going on.
Yeah, and I think we all get those signs. And I think like I shared this fairly recently because I used to love like crime and mystery, like true crime and all of that stuff. But I didn't understand that I was looking at it through a different lens until I started doing this work, but it was understanding why people turn into the people that they turn into and why they do the things they do and how traumatic events lay out in people's lives based upon the things they've been through. And one of the things that I watched fairly recently, and I was a Girl Scout my whole life. I went to Girl Scout camp and all of that. And there's a show on, I think it's Hulu or Netflix, I'm not sure. And it talks about a murder, 3 little girls that were killed at a Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma, like back in like the early mid 70s. And it talks about one of the little girls was telling her mother, I don't want to go to camp. I can't tell you why. I don't understand. I don't want to go. And her mom's like, you'll have so much fun when you get there. And she went and she died. And of course, this mother has to carry this grief about this little girl knew something about our bodies tell us so many times, like this situation isn't safe. This person isn't safe. I'm not safe in this environment. All these different, our body gives us all these different signs when you lean more into your intuition and you've done some healing, so that you can make decisions based upon where you're supposed to be and your greater good, because that's what our intuition is there to do. It's there to protect us. And for this little girl, like I can't imagine for a mother to have said to her little girl, you're going to have so much fun. And then she died. Had she taken what she said and honored what she said, she probably would still be alive right now. And that's so sad. But you sit there and you think about, you know, different people like that. The story that I just shared, the kid that was killed when he went with some friends, which is not the term, but he messaged to see if this certain person that he was scared of was there. Like, that's you saying to yourself, I don't think I'm safe here. But then you make a decision that you're trying to justify why you're still going to go. And then you end up losing your life. And there's so many different points, and it doesn't have to be this big, huge thing, but it could just be different things within your life that your intuition and your life is trying to tell you, don't go here, you're not safe there. And because we've had traumatic experiences, or because we have a belief system that tells us something specific, we learn to shut that off. And that is our barometer to be safe. And it's so important.
Okay, so I moved to actually do a theta here clearing statement right now. Is that cool with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'd like to change what obligates us. That means we don't have a choice in turning off our intuition and ignoring our higher judgment. So anybody that would like that, just go ahead and say yes, and you'll get that healing work, even if you're watching the replay.
Absolutely. I want that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. I'm me tooing that. So give me a second and we
No.
will do that clearing statement.
Okay.
And it's really as quick as that. And so now the thing is, okay, so you've gotten the clearing statement. Now your next thing is go ahead, pay attention to your intuition, play with it, have fun with it, allow your, play with it and have fun with it. Even allow yourself to just, experiment with it a little bit. It doesn't have to be as heavy as like, ignoring your judgment or what have you. But since that was a really poignant one, we were doing the statement.
No, I love it. I love it. I think, and the flip side of intuition and the flip side of knowing yourself better is you get those drop-ins that are really amazing. And like, when I think about my husband, like his picture literally dropped up, like when I was looking, when I was signing up my profile, when we met online, and his picture popped up, and I will forever remember seeing it on the screen. It was the fourth picture across the top row. And I was like, that's my husband. I heard it. And I was like, I'm going to go ahead and send him a little coffee chat. He does not drink coffee. However, it was like this very clear voice that I heard, that is my husband. And 8 years later, he is.
I had kind of a fun experience where I manifested my husband. I remember just doing some journaling and talking to God, although I didn't realize that's what I was doing one time. And I'm like, I would like a partner that totally supports me, loves me, and treats me like a goddess. And somebody that I can do the same for in return.
Yeah. And I think there's the world is so lonely, and the world wants love so badly that we take it in whatever form it comes versus what is best for us. And being so intentional about what you deserve, what you believe about yourself, and understanding what you believe, because a lot of times the reason why we choose really horrible people, and I chose horrible people for a really long time because of my trauma, and because I didn't have the worthiness around myself and what I believed about who I deserved, what I believed. And it wasn't like every guy I ever dated was horrible, but the ones that were nice to me didn't feel comfortable because that was not what I was accustomed to. And when you take that trauma with you, it manifests and duplicates in so many different areas in your life.
Okay, so if you're comfortable answering the question, what changed to break it so you're vibrating at the level of your current husband?
The first thing that changed is I got to be really successful financially. I had been through a lot, and I was like, I'm a high school dropout, college dropout. So like I'd had like really great jobs and not so great jobs. And when I was in network marketing, I was making really great money, and I was working from home. So I didn't have to like go to work, in a job 9 to 5. And it was kind of this moment where I had just started, because they always talk about like personal development. I didn't know what that was at the time. But so I just started reading books, and I actually found Brene Brown, which is oddly enough where it all started for me. God, she is my, like, if I could ever manifest my dream guest or my dream coach, it would be her. Cause
I would love her, but I'd also love Jen Sincero.
Oh,
You Are a Badass.
She was a customer when I used to bartend in New Mexico.
Oh, that is so awesome.
Way before she was ever who she became. Yeah.
That is so cool.
And her book was one of the first books that I remember reading as well. But it was like, for me, it was getting my finances together so that I wasn't in, I had crawled myself out of $60,000 in debt, because that for me, I needed that to feel like, okay, I'm not becoming a burden to somebody, is how I didn't want to be. And because I had been through so much stuff, I was like, I'm a single mother with $60,000 in debt and I'm making $30,000 a year. Like, who is going to sign up for that? You know what I mean? That was just kind of like my realization of like, I got to be real about what I'm going to get if I go out there in the world and look for a man. And when I got to me making more money and I paid off all my debt, I had always been like, I'm a cute enough girl. Like, you get online and, put your little profile, and then it was like, whoever messages you. And then it was like this shift for me where I thought, what if I just like picked what I wanted versus, I created my profile like I would normally do, but I didn't just wait to see who would message me. I went and like picked the things that I wanted in a husband. And it was like, I mean, some of it's superficial. My husband's almost 6'4". It was a thing that I wanted. Well, put that on the list. I wanted somebody with no kids, which is super hypocritical. I am aware, because I had a daughter, but I had dated people that had children. And so I didn't want to deal with that, because there was no drama as far as my baby's father, because he was dead. So I'm like, I don't want to have to deal with baby mamas and all of that stuff. And so it was very specific. I don't want anybody who has kids, and I wanted to be a mom again. And so that was important to me as well. And so somebody wanted kids. And so instead of the thing that happened that date that was different than anything I'd ever done from a dating perspective before, is I chose who I wanted and I put parameters around what I was looking for. And I didn't respond to people that didn't meet those criteria. And it wasn't like they weren't emailing me. And then my husband was literally the first page that popped up. His picture was on the top right.
Well, and I think that's important. So let's go back to that just a little bit.
Okay.
When we're, figuring out what we want and setting our parameters, it's important to also realize what we don't want and to say no. And that's the great thing about life, because we have choices, and it's okay to say no.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make all those other people and those guys that messaged you bad. It just meant that you guys weren't the right fit.
Right. And I think, it doesn't have to be this huge, like, oh, you're not good enough for me, or you're not this, you're not that. There's no hatefulness to it, but it's like, these are the things that I know that I want for myself, and you are not those things. And so we're not a good fit. And
Yeah,
I think I had so many years where I was so starved for like love and affection and wanting to just have somebody to be there, that I just chose people that was all they were. And they were messier than I was, and that was easier to deal with. And so I just kind of ran with it.
this is really great stuff, but is there anything else you wanted to specifically address about trauma and spirituality? Because we're doing this great stuff, but we might have gotten off track a smidge.
No, that's okay. Absolutely. Which totally happens. I told you I had ADD.
That's okay.
So
we're good.
when I think about one of the things that I wanted to touch on is from a spirituality perspective, we talked about what it kind of means to us. And for me, when I talk about it with clients, there's 3 things that we talk about specifically. One is the relationships that you have in your life. And that is, for me, the relationship with whoever you believe. For some people it's God, some people it's universe, some people it's spirit, some people it's all of the above, Buddha, Allah. Like, the spirituality to me, and what I think is important for people to find outside of from a religious perspective, is who that person is and how do you call them? Like, what is the way that is easiest for you to connect with that person? That is your anchor, is what I kind of think of it.
Yeah.
And if it changes, because as you grow, as you heal, as you learn more about yourself, the way that you call that person and the way that you connect with them could completely change. And being able to honor that change and that shift.
Can I interject one quick thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, I totally resonate with that, because for the longest time I went with the term spirit. And then when I started my theta healing, I realized how loaded the God terminology was for me. So I specifically decided to work around that. And now my go-to phrase is either God or creator. And it was interesting because there was an up level with that as I allowed myself to release the baggage around just that one little, word. I mean, and there was a lot of it. Yeah. Things changed, things shifted.
No, and for me, I stopped calling God for a really long time. But the odd thing for me is that it would be in conversations, but like my favorite song in the whole wide world that I listen to before I do any speaking engagement, when I'm really in it and I'm deep and I'm really struggling is Francesca Battistelli's He Knows My Name, because at different points in my life when I didn't understand who God was, and I didn't understand if he even cared about me, because there was some really dark times. That song for me has been an anthem song. And it's like, I didn't understand who he was, but like that song has resonated with me for years. And I mean, pretty much when it came out, like the first time I heard it was actually, it was at church, and it was a church that I was like, I don't want to be here again. But it was the last time I went there, and that I heard that song, and it just took it with me. And that has kind of been a little bit of an anchor for my faith and my spirituality since then, because I think and I think you have to find something that kind of roots you back into your spirituality, into your belief system. And for some people it's a song, for some people it's a verse, some people it's a line in the Bible, it could be a quote, it could be anything. And understanding that spirituality, I feel like, is fluid. I feel like it can be God some days, and it can be spirit other days, and it can be, signs like 111 and 222 and different things. And the more that you tune into yourself and your belief system, the more those messages start kind of popping up, and you start getting, asking and being very specific about saying, one of the things that I do when it comes to my company is, it's never, I need to make this much money this month, which, obviously have a financial goal. You got bills to pay. I have a whole team that relies on me to make sure that their bills are paid too. But my anthem is, who am I meant to touch? Who am I to serve? What do I need to say so that the woman that I'm meant to help hears it and knows that this is for her?
Yeah.
And for me, that ties to spirituality, because so many things can be an ego, and I feel like spirituality doesn't allow for that.
No. So, okay. So getting back on track. So what is the second thing? We talked about the first one being terminology of God, spirit, what have you.
So relationships, value. So for me, spirituality is, what value do I have in myself when I think about spirituality? Because there's such a pour in about who we are, what we believe, and all of those things. And what value do I hold in myself, for me, is another rooting in spirituality. And the other piece for me, which is the third piece that I this is just my belief system. This is
Absolutely.
just how
Absolutely.
I'm like, this is not in a book. This is just what
The
I
rule
think.
according to Gabi.
Yes. The Gabi Chronicles, here we go. And the third thing is my purpose, because I think spirituality will lead you to your purpose. And it's going to take some healing. It's going to take some silence, because I think when you are, like I said, working in ego, you do a lot of things, or you listen to a lot of voices, or a lot of pour-ins from other people. And for me, spirituality is being rooted in my purpose, and knowing what that is, and knowing how it could change as I grow and as I move in the world. And constantly asking what that is supposed to look like has been a deeply rooted thing for my spirituality and for my life in general.
I love that. And I'd love to invite our people that are watching on the replay to keep asking that question. What is my purpose? What is the point? And all you have to do is ask the question, and then listen to the answer, or wait for the answer, which may come about in the most interesting way. It might just pop into your head. You might get a conversation, piece in a book, a TV show. It could be anything.
And it's so interesting too, like when I think about, different things that you do in your life, you'll notice different, like when you're really intentional about, what do I believe? Where am I supposed to go? And you're asking those questions constantly. And you're asking for confirmation specifically. Like there's different points for me, for spirituality. If I'm really confused about a particular path that I'm supposed to take, I will ask, like, this is the sign that I need you to give me. I need you to give me cherries. I need you to give me cows. I need you to give me, like things that you wouldn't normally just see in your life. Like I'm not going to see like a raccoon or whatever it is for you. It could be something totally random. My girlfriend, it's all turtles. Everything is like, when she's like really in it, she's like, I want to see turtles. And it's so interesting to watch turtles just start popping up in her life. And it's just, this is the path that I think I'm on. And if I'm on the right path, show me turtles. And she's like, turtle, 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 turtle. And other people, it's different things.
One thing that I find really interesting with what you're saying is I had this huge fear of, quote unquote, surrendering to God. Okay. And this has been like just a huge thing with me. But what I ended up finding out is, at least for me, God doesn't really want me to surrender. The surrender is all about the co-creating. Because every time I ask the question, what should I do? It always comes, 99.9% of the time, it comes back as, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And it's a totally interesting reframe, because I feel like we have these fears around what our relationship with God would be like, what co-creation is, what surrender is.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically think we overthink it.
Yeah. And I think for most people, surrender sounds scary. Like if
Oh,
you
yeah.
tell a client, like, just surrender in this session, like, what the hell am I about to do? Because that's not a comfortable term. And to anybody, I don't think.
No, but I
Yeah.
think we can reframe it, or at least release some of the baggage around it.
Yeah. You can say like allow it in versus surrender to it.
Right. Right.
That seems
Yeah,
a little
exactly.
less daunting, where you're like, oh God, what's about to go down? Oh, yeah. I think for me, when I think about my life, when I think about trauma, when I think about spirituality, like the more that I have looked at the really horrific times that I've gone through, and there have been some that I've never talked publicly about. I don't know that I ever will. Those times are when I was tested the most, and my spirituality came to save me. And I think learning how to heal and learning where to go and to keep looking for more answers is such an important piece for everybody that's been through anything in their life, to keep searching for what's going to help you, because you just never know. There's so many different ways to heal. There's so many different ways to dig into spirituality, to shed trauma, and to just be fucking happy, because who wants to go through their life feeling horrible and feeling uncomfortable in their bodies and just being sad? Like that's not how we're meant to do. And so, yeah, unrelated, but it just kind of.
No, and what popped up for me though is that's when we sometimes run into the issue of like having a comfort zone, because sometimes we are absolutely miserable, and we're full of stress, we're full of overwhelm, things are going all the heck, but that's what we know.
Yeah.
And so working with a practitioner and working on myself has really helped me, realizing that making that jump is safe, to tell myself it's safe, to get that fight or flight response to calm down. And that's really why you want to be working with a practitioner, because I can do amazing things on myself as a practitioner, but I bet you if I went to talk to Gabi about the same issue, she'd clear it up in a quarter of the time that it would take me, even with the speed that I work.
Yeah, it's such a powerful opportunity to grow. And even when I do my sales coaching programs, which I haven't done in a while because there's too many people. Like it's all around stop being spammy. But even within the sales coaching piece, like everything in your life plays to the narrative that you believe. And until you heal what that looks like on the inside, you're going to see patterns in your life be negative and unfortunate and tragic and not conducive for where you're trying to go. And that's trauma. I mean, it's at the root of it, that's trauma.
Yeah. And I just like to touch back on the fact that we talked earlier about the different kinds of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like we need to not judge what type of trauma we have. You've had some very horrific, big traumas. I haven't really had that experience, but that doesn't we don't need to judge, oh, she's had more trauma than I have, or, I can take more than she does, or whatever, because that's ego right there.
It is. And I think people do, like I've had people that have come to me like, I don't really know why I'm supposed to work with you, but I feel like I've never really gone through anything crazy. So like, I don't even know if I need this, but like, I just want to talk to you about it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it, because get curious, because it doesn't have to. So many of the things that we end up believing about ourselves that are technically trauma, that are stored in our subconscious, are little tiny moments. They're not big, huge, my, ex-boyfriend used to beat the crap out of me type of situations. They're these little surrender moments where you surrender to the way that somebody else said you were or who you were. And then you carried that. And it isn't always this big, huge, dramatic event.
And that's like dying by the death of like 1,000 mini paper cuts. It really
is.
It
is. And some of the stuff that I would think would be very small, that I've uncovered, is stuff that has played like entire scenarios different into my life. Like, we think we do this because of whatever big thing we thought happened. And it was something completely small and completely unrelated that we just didn't even understand. And getting to uncover those and learn from them, even if as small as it is just it's such a blessing to your life. And it's such a gift to your growth.
All right. Is there anything else specifically that you wanted to share that's on your list?
No, I don't. I have everything else. I think when I think the one thing that I do want to say when you look at spirituality, and I think a lot of people shy away from that term. If you grew up in a very deeply religious community, is so much of, like, I had this conversation probably about 6-8 months ago on social, where the girl was talking about God didn't bring sage, and like was naming some of the stuff that we love from a spirituality perspective. But in the Catholic Church, there's the incense that you use. So what's the difference between incense and sage? Like, I think expanding your thought process behind the ways that people can heal and the ways that people can connect to a higher being doesn't have to look just like this. It doesn't have to look like it does in this little tiny box. And being open to that, and to learning, and to allowing someone to teach you something that you don't know, because that could be the thing that changes everything for you. And you move out of a stuck season that you've been stuck in for 6 months, 6 years, 16 years. And you deserve that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I feel complete with the conversation. So if people want to find you, if they want to work with you, how do they connect with you, Gabby? Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. I'm Gabi Garland on everything, and it's GABI GARLAND, like Christmas garland, which is my favorite season, by the way. But yeah, that's the easiest way. I have my healing agency, and then I have a podcast agency as well. So for people that have decided they want to start a podcast, we can take you from, I don't know what I want to do, I just want to start a podcast, all the way through your actual launch, and which is so much fun. And getting to put out podcasts that share these types of conversations, and give people the opportunity to just amplify their voice, it's so cool. So that's it. That's how you get in touch with me.
I totally geek out about that too. I think that would be so fun.
Oh my gosh. It is the coolest thing. And of course it's helped. It built my agency, hands down, my podcast. But the conversations with women that I have in my inbox that have nothing to do with me hiring them as a coach, and being able to have them say, like, I feel seen. I cannot believe that, like, other women have gone through this, or is this what this is? Opening up those conversations and being somebody that people can have that conversation with, they wouldn't know me otherwise, from my podcast, is so cool. It's so cool.
Oh, I bet. I love having deep conversations. I am so not a shallow conversation type of girl.
I'm like, sorry, we don't do the sky is blue and the grass is green conversations over here.
We do not. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Gabby.
No, thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. And I hope everybody has a fantastic day. If you'd like to get a hold of Gabby, I will go ahead and drop the information on the website, as well as in the Facebook group. And we will see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.